It is the 18th of February, 1977. It is 2 o'clock in the morning in Lagos, Nigeria, and 1,000 soldiers of the Nigerian military are surrounding a single compound. Inside that compound lives one man, one musician, one voice that the most powerful military government in West Africa has decided it can no longer tolerate. His name is Fela Kuti. And what happens in the next few hours will become one of the most savage acts of state violence ever committed against a single artist in history. To understand why 1,000 soldiers were sent to silence one musician, you have to go back to the beginning. Fela Kuti was born on the 15th of October 1938 in Abeokuta, a town 80 kilometers north of Lagos. His family was part of the Nigerian elite. His father was a reverend and school principal, a man of quiet dignity who was once slashed across the face by a soldier's bayonet because he refused to remove his hat while walking past a British flag. His mother was something else entirely. Chief Funmilayo Kuti was one of the most important political activists in Nigerian history. She founded the Abeokuta Women's Union, led campaigns against British colonial taxation, organized market women to resist colonial rule, and became close friends with Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of Ghana. She was eventually banned from traveling abroad by her own government for being too dangerous. Fela inherited everything from her: the defiance, the platform, the absolute refusal to be quiet. In 1958, the young Fela left Nigeria for London to study music at Trinity College. He failed his entrance theory paper, but the principal, recognizing his exceptional talent on the trumpet, let him in anyway. In London, he formed a band and played the clubs of the black community, performing a genre called high life, a fusion of jazz and West African rhythms. He graduated in 1962 and returned to Nigeria. But something was missing. His music wasn't yet saying what he needed it to say. The turning point came in 1969, during a musical tour of the United States at the height of the Nigerian Civil War. There, Fela met a woman named Sandra Smith, a Black Panther, a civil rights activist, a woman who would change everything. Sandra introduced Fela to the writings of Malcolm X, Angela Davis, Frantz Fanon, and the revolutionary thinkers who were reshaping black consciousness across the world. She broadened his worldview in ways that London never had. Fela later credited both his mother and Sandra Smith with inspiring what he called his philosophy of blackism, a fierce, unapologetic celebration of African identity, culture, and self-determination. He returned to Nigeria a different man. He took jazz, blended it with Yoruba traditional rhythms, added the energy of James Brown's funk, and created something entirely new. He called it Afrobeat. But Afrobeat was never just music. From the very beginning, Fela used every song as a political weapon. His lyrics, sung in pidgin English so that ordinary Nigerians across all tribal lines could understand, attacked corruption, military rule, Western exploitation of Africa, and the suffering of the poor, with a directness that was almost incomprehensible in its bravery. He named names. He named generals. He named government ministers. He named multinational companies. He renamed his band Africa 70, released album after album, performed at his legendary Lagos venue, the Africa Shrine, 3 times a week, and built a following that the government watched with growing alarm. Around this time, Fela did something else. He dropped the name Ransom from his surname, a name he considered a relic of colonial slavery, and replaced it with Anikulapo, a Yoruba phrase, meaning one who has captured death and put it in his pouch. He was telling the world something. He was telling them he was untouchable. He was wrong about that. But only just. By the mid-1970s, Fela had built something extraordinary in Lagos. He called it the Kalakuta Republic, a commune, a recording studio, a free clinic for the poor, a home for dozens of musicians, dancers, family members, and followers. He declared it an independent republic, sovereign territory, beyond the reach of the Nigerian state. The state disagreed, and the song that finally pushed them over the edge was called Zombie. In it, Fela compared Nigerian soldiers to mindless zombies, men who followed orders without thought, without conscience, without humanity. The military did not take kindly to this. Combined with years of provocations, arrests, raids, and defiance, the army decided it had finally had enough of Fela Kuti and his music. And so, on the night of the 18th of February 1977, 1,000 soldiers arrived at the Kalakuta Republic. They broke down the gates. They beat everyone inside. They destroyed the recording studio. They burned the building to the ground. Women were beaten and sexually assaulted. Musicians were dragged into the street. Master tapes, years of recordings, were destroyed in the fire. Fela himself was beaten so severely he required hospitalization. And his mother, Fela Kuti, the woman who had spent her entire life fighting for Nigeria's freedom, was found on the second floor of the building by soldiers. She was 77 years old. They threw her from the window. She never recovered from her injuries. She died the following year. What does a man do when the state burns everything he has built, beats the people he loves, and kills his mother? Fela Kuti did what Fela Kuti always did. He made an album. He took his mother's coffin, and on the one-year anniversary of her death, carried it personally to the gates of the military barracks, holding General Obasanjo, the head of state, directly responsible for what had happened. He and his 60 supporters were ferociously beaten by soldiers. Again, he went back to the studio and recorded Coffin for head of state, a direct, named accusation. Released across Nigeria, unstoppable. But the government wasn't finished. On the 4th of September 1984, Fela was about to board a plane at Lagos Airport for a United States tour when he was arrested. The charge? Currency smuggling. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Years later, the judge who sentenced him made a public statement, admitting that he had been pressured by the military regime into giving Fela a disproportionately long sentence. The judge visited Fela in prison to apologize. Fela was released in 1986. He walked out of prison, held a press conference at the Africa Shrine, announced he was reviving his political movement, and immediately began recording again. They couldn't break him. They never could. In the years that followed, Fela continued releasing music that attacked governments, multinational corporations, and global institutions by name. He married 27 women in a single day to legitimize the status of the women living with him in the commune, who were being stigmatized by conservative Nigerian society, and to reclaim traditional African values over the colonial ones that had been imposed on his country. He ran for president. He was disqualified on a technicality. The people called him the Black President anyway. Fela Kuti died on the 2nd of August 1997 from AIDS-related illness at the age of 58. 150,000 people gathered at the venue to pay their respects. Over 1 million others lined the streets of Lagos as his coffin was carried to the shrine for a private ceremony. For a man the government had spent 3 decades trying to erase. His son, Fela Kuti, and his grandson, Kuti, both carry the music forward today. The shrine still stands. His music has been sampled by Jay-Z, by Beyoncé, by Kendrick Lamar. A Broadway musical about his life ran for years in New York. The man they sent 1,000 soldiers to silence is now studied in universities across the world. There is something important in that last detail. 1,000 soldiers, one musician. They sent an army, because somewhere, someone understood that a man with a saxophone and the truth is more dangerous than anything else they had. They were right. This is the song behind the story, where music isn't the background, it's the point.
Her voice carries us still today.